so much. I love you so much. I love you so much. I love you so much.
Hello, all you positive heads out there. Thanks for tuning your beautiful brainwaves into another episode of the Positive Head Podcast, where we are firmly convinced that creating success and happiness is rooted in understanding the ultimate nature of reality and the fact that as human beings, we are all immensely powerful fractals of the one and only source consciousness which creates and animates all things. After years of exploring this awe-inspiring truth on this podcast, I'm super excited to announce that we are now going even deeper down the rabbit hole on the new late-night style consciousness-elevating talk show called Optimistic, which features none other than you, the listeners. Optimistic is taped out of the epic spaceship-esque 8-bedroom property we call the Mystic Manor that myself and the rest of the Optimistic crew now navigate reality from in Venice Beach, California. And you are invited to come experience a Mystic Manor immersion week with us. During your week-long stay, you'll enjoy unique workshops, chef-prepared meals, one-on-one time coaching and consulting with me, and even co-creating magic with me as a guest on both Optimistic and an episode of the Positive Head podcast. When I started this, my aim with these immersive retreats was to facilitate the ultimate spiritual upgrade and tune-up, so to speak, for our guests while providing them with one of the most memorable experiences of their lives. And I'm happy to say that as of this recording, every guest at the end of their trip so far has told me that they have had a profound and transformational experience at the Mystic Manor and that they definitely want to come back. All that being said, we only have a limited number of spots available between now and next July. And as of this recording, about half of those spots are already filled. So if there's any part of you that is screaming, yes, I want to come, I feel like I need to be there, go now and book a slot with me to discuss how we can put our heads together and make it happen at calendly.com/talkwithbrandon. I know for some people there is also that little voice in their head saying, why not? I can't get off work. I can't afford it, and on and on and on. But, really Henry Ford, I think, said it best. Whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. And I'm confident that where there's a will, there's a way. And I'm personally committed to doing everything in my power, including discounts and payment plans, to get you here if it is something that truly feels like a huge yes for you energetically and like you're meant to be here. Once again, the link to book time to discuss with me is calendly.com/talkwithbrandon. That's spelled calendly.com/talkwithbrandon. All one word, of course. And book in some time and look forward to seeing you soon here at the Mystic Manor. All right, all you positive heads. On this week's Soul Share episode, I am super excited to have my brother from another alien, Cory Allen, back here with me on the show. Cory was originally on the show many nows ago on episode 271. We're over like 1,000 now. And he's back in this now to give us the download on his brand new book, Now is the Way. Welcome back, Cory.
Oh, man. Thank you so much. My atoms are vibrating. My alien atoms are vibrating. I'm excited. Thank you for having me.
That's a whole rabbit hole in itself. That's a whole show in itself, talking about alien DNA or the potential that aliens have spliced our DNA. And, oh, man, that's like, there's, fascinating. I just had this guy, Siraj Raval, on the show who is all about robotics, has a big YouTube channel with, where he talks about robotics and, what the things that are possible and they're realizing with our DNA, and like this idea that there could be code injected into it, and like it looks like it could have been edited, and like that's a whole nother show, I suppose.
Indeed, yeah. And then you think about if you can inject code into DNA, then you could also inject like malware and shit like that, which
Yep. Yep.
It's a little disconcerting, but let's deal with today, right?
Let's deal with the now. Back to the now.
Yeah.
Although it could be happening out there somewhere. There's definitely some people I've come across who seem like they've had some malware injected into their DNA.
Indeed. And so speaking of rabbit hole, I was rereading just the original Alice in Wonderland and the Through the Looking Glass books.
Ah, yeah.
And at the very beginning, it'd been like a few decades, I think, since I'd read them. And at the very beginning, she mentions, Alice mentions going down following that rabbit and then going down the rabbit hole. And it made me wonder, is that where that term comes from?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I sort of have always assumed that's where it came from.
That's cool. Yeah, it was one of those little mini aha things. It was like, oh, wait a second.
Oh,
maybe that's where that came from.
Slow in uptake. We'll have to look into that. Actually, now I'm curious because I think so. I've just assumed so, but who knows? Could be wrong.
Yeah,
wouldn't be the first time. So I want to ask you the same question I probably asked you. Looking back, it was October 5th, 2016. Last time I had you on.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. I want to see if your answer has changed. So I always start off with, yeah, exactly. We're allowed to change, it turns out. And so my question is this. You're in an elevator. The woman looks over next to you, says, what's your passion? You have 10 floors to answer. What do you say?
Oh, I would say my passion is being as much of a source of peace and equanimity in the world as I can.
That's a good passion. I like that.
Yeah, just bringing there's a lot of twisted vibes out there, man, and I think to me showing up in the world as present and kind and as a active author of your current moment in your future and guiding that in all of your interactions and showing up in the most positive way possible, I think to me is the best work that I can do in every waking moment of life.
Right. Yeah, it's truly like it's like the saying, if you want to, yesterday I was smart and wanted to change the world. Today I'm wise and want to change myself or something like that. And it's like once you realize that, and this is something that I geek out on all the time, this idea that I'm living in my own private YO universe, and everything is showing up as a reflection of sort of me in some way, shape, or form. And that's how I feel like I can control what's happening, across the seas, or I can step into, there's like infinite timelines where I can step into those potentials by shifting my own inner state. And whether true or not true, it brings me peace. I think, thinking and feeling that is, I really believe, obviously I haven't figured out how to end all, I haven't went into meditation yet and ended world hunger, but who knows, maybe by next week it's, I'm working on it.
Yeah. That's the interesting thing with that is that it really is like you can't make other people change, right? Because the only way that any of us change is by realizing something ourselves. And you can't make someone realize something. But what you can do is, be the best representation and the best person, version of yourself that you can in the world. And that acts as this contrast and this ecosystem that, gives people the data, the destination. They're like, oh, wait a second, that's an interesting key turn that person just did. And then that's what leads to them having that realization and being able to take action.
Totally. Yeah. I just had, I just did a recording of, my new show, Optimistic, I was telling you about before we turned on the mic. And my good friend, Christopher Jackson, was on, and he talks about this whole perspective of what he calls, wonderfulness, spelled O-N-E, wonderfulness. And he always talks about wonderfulness and what is that and what that means to him and how do we, start navigating reality in our interactions with others. And one of the most impressive things I've seen from him as a close personal friend of his, is like how he deals with someone, because he's one of these people who can definitely trigger a good percentage of people he comes across, but he's also got all this wisdom. And, and one of the things, in my own interactions with him is bringing up like, things that I've had an issue with him over the years, where it's like, okay, like, dude, I don't like how you did this, and this. And his approach to it is like, what if instead of always becoming defensive, we approached it as like, oh, wow, I'm sorry that I'm an asshole, or, you're perceiving me as an asshole. Like basically agreeing, he said, because of the power of agreement, we don't have to, we always have the power to agree with someone, even if, and it doesn't mean it discredits our own perspective on something. Like, oh, wow, okay, I acknowledge that's your perspective, and please explain to me how and why I'm coming off that way, and what I can do because if you're perceiving me in that way, then it doesn't. His point is it really doesn't matter. I've missed the mark if if that's what's happening. And what's really interesting about that, he's kind of talked about that sort of thing for a while. And very recently, I had a very charged moment with him where it's like, I kind of like, I said some things to him that if someone said to me, I would be in defensive posture and like, well, and not necessarily coming back with like that response. And he came back in that way, and it instantly just dissolved it all and just like changed the way I showed up and perceived him, and, and led to this incredible, sort of resolution. And so I find that like, wow, that's like, there's a lot of power there. And, putting down this ego, and as he put the, moving into the we go, going from the me go to the we go, and realizing like, okay, if some part of me, some extension of me is perceiving me or experiencing me in this way, I want to look at that and understand it and not take it, it's feedback. It's not really personal in a way that you need to get all your defensive posture up. And I find that super, super empowering.
Oh yeah, it's a beautiful sentiment, and it really does ring true. I mean, as you said, the way that all of us perceive reality individually, that is all that we can know. It's our impression of what is. And so even if we, as you said, mistake something, or we, something touches us in a way that touches a nerve within us based on our experience or so forth, that results in a certain feeling or even a resentment, it can be work for the person who's perceiving that to do on their own. But the key is that if someone comes to you, with that conflict in mind, and they mention it to you, just telling them, like, not validating their own reality is what creates a lot of the combustion and conflicts, because they're saying, totally. Hey, I perceive this and I'm feeling this. And you say, no, you're not. I mean, that's literally just going to create more destruction because you're not validating and hearing them. But man, building that bridge to each other and saying, okay, as you said, like, well, what happened? And it's crazy how so much of conflict boils down to communication, clear, totally. Open communication, because it just opens up this whole different world of understanding between two people. And then ultimately, I've had to kind of pressure test some friendships before in that same way you were talking about. And it turns out it strengthens the bond, because, someone you've known for 20 years or something, you get into this, a little thing where they are coming at you in this weird way, and it can be inexplicable to you. Like that's the thing that happened to me recently. It was like one of my best friends out of nowhere. I know it's been a decade since something like that has happened, got really like frustrated and aggressive towards me. And I was like, I'm just going to go ahead and like accept whatever you're putting on me right now, even though it's completely off my map of perception. I don't understand where this is coming from, but I love you. I hear you. I'm going to listen to you right now. And, we need to, let's follow up with this, tomorrow or whatever. And then it turned out that we had some long, couple of conversations, and it was a beautiful thing. It was like, oh, I understand why he was frustrated. And it was through zero intention of my own to call it, to say what I said that made him frustrated, because it was touching on something that he was working with inside that I didn't know he was working with. And so I was joking around about it, and it struck a chord with him, and it made him defensive. And, but moving through that, with that bridge of communication, it's like, oh, this is a beautiful thing. And we're even closer now, And one thing that comes up in the mindfulness / meditation world that I think is such a crucial element on this topic is that, there's a lot of conversation around, okay, so part of mindfulness, of course, is being aware of your thoughts, being conscious of what's arising, being able to navigate those anger thoughts or frustration thoughts or ego thoughts, whatever, and allowing those to let go. And then the positive thoughts, constructive thoughts, having those the ones that you honor and turn into action and send out into the world. But if you're, in a relationship or you have children or your parents or whatever, and they're constantly doing things, this is the thing I hear all the time, they're constantly doing things that frustrate you. People say, well, I've got good at the catching my anger, catching my frustration, my reactive behavior, and not reacting, but letting it go and letting it move on and not, exploding and being angry. But then they say, but I start feeling resentment over time because I'm the one that's taking on water constantly, and it starts to build up. And the thing that a lot of people don't talk about is that in that situation, that, step one is catching the frustration and the negative thoughts and letting them go. Step two is then learning how to do what we're talking about now, is then saying, okay, why am I feeling these things? And then being able to communicate that back to the person that you're interacting with.
Right. In a productive way.
Exactly.
Ideally.
It'll be productive one way or the other, no matter how you approach. Just what will you produce? That's the question.
And it's funny how, of course, I'm sure you've heard the I think it's Ram Dass who said, if you think you're enlightened, spend a week with your family quote. Oh, totally. And man, that one rings so true for me. It's like, I get so good at so proud of my way. I had a guy in the Positive Heads Facebook group, private group of maybe a year or so ago. And this guy just came in and he just started rattling. He was on the show, and then I don't know what his MO was. I think it might be to go in and disrupt groups and then just get people to come with him. And he has this sort of, there's definitely some spiritual narcissism going on there. And it was just here's our very peaceful, loving group. And this guy came in and he just started he just turned the thing upside down. And it was really such a challenge for me to not react in a way. I can be pretty fiery. And that's sort of been my path most of my life. It's just getting fired up about something, if that's quote unquote, unjust or whatever, unjust. And so I did really, really well, and dealing with it. And ultimately, we ended up removing him from the group. Took a poll and had him removed. And then I can turn around with my brother, 2 years apart, been together, in each other's lives closely, our business partners, et cetera, et cetera. And it's I can flare up in 2 seconds and that's such an old pattern with us, to get into the state of agitation. So it's very interesting to see even to perceive how I'm able to, it seems like newer people in my life, I'm better equipped even than those familial, or older relationships can definitely, prove to be the most challenging.
Oh yeah, the seeds are deep on those, and it's a part of, as your identity was being formed, that got in at the ground level, so that's why so many people, whenever they return to spend time with their families, that everyone starts reverting to childlike identity and adult, kind of over-parenting identity and all this stuff, or siblings start getting into those same patterns that they were. And it's tough, man, to even pull your head above water and recognize what's happening. And then once you do, the way to break that, of course, is by, it takes some discipline, but just staying connected to who you are today. And that's what breaks those patterns. And it can be a little challenging because most people in life tend to kind of operate off this, what I call the sitcom mentality, where it's everyone in their life system is an actor playing this role in this cosmic drama, and they all have their script. And whenever someone starts going off script, you're like, hey, you're making me look like an asshole. We're recording here. What are you doing? Like, you're blowing your lines. And it makes people upset, and they tend to either use criticism or anger or whatever, exclusion, to fight back. Because what's happening is that whenever you present a new dimension of who you are, and someone has this long old story of who you are in their minds, you stop carrying their narrative for them. This is something that people who have parents if you kind of have to parent your parents sometimes or something like that, or parent your siblings. And whenever because compassion, of course, is an intention. It's not being a doormat and allowing people to walk all over you. You've got to set boundaries as a person and protect yourself. And so you get into these situations where whenever you present a version of you that is more realized, that you've been doing work or whatever and trying to optimize and wake up a bit and become a better you, then the older people you've known in your life that come around and they try and go into those old patterns, whenever you go off script, they get frustrated, they lash out, right? Because you're not carrying their story for them anymore. Right. You know what I mean? That idea of who they've been telling themselves who they are for the last 20 years, or what you should be like. And whenever you stop carrying that, then they can have no use for you, or they can be mad because they can literally, it's so bizarre, but it's like why the political divide is so extreme is because whenever we start introducing a new element of reality to other people's lives, it literally, if it challenges the way that someone sees the world, it actually feels like they're being attacked, because their I, their capital I, is the composite of their reality. That is their world. What they perceive is what they form as their identity. If you start adding information that's unauthorized to that, it feels like it's removing part of their I. And so it feels like they're being attacked physically. And so they start lashing out, because you're like, don't erase my ego, because if you erase your ego, you erase me. And they haven't got to that point where they figured out that that's all an illusion yet.
Right. Yeah, it's, and to take it one step weirder. So one of the things that I will often think about, so I don't know if you're familiar, there's a book called Oneness by a woman named Rasha, I think Rasha it's just Rasha, anyway, it's supposedly channeled material. I always say about that stuff, I don't know whether it's channeled or not. How good is the material, right?
Yeah, isn't everything channeled material?
Yeah, right, exactly. I say that too. It's like, every art, yes. And so I, read this book years ago, and I actually read it on the show over time. I would randomly pick chapters, and it's just one of my favorites. I view it as like the guidebook to ascension, and it's so beautifully written and intelligent, and so many chords of truth, things that have rung true for me on my own journey. And so she talks about in that book this idea that she goes, as we sort of, ascend, as things, we evolve into the next iteration of humanity, you're going to notice some of the things that will start to happen is these conflicts with characters in your movie, in your story, that seem completely unnatural. They don't make sense. They're completely out of context. This person completely overreacted. You have no idea where it came from. There's no rhyme, reason, logic. And her thoughts on that is like, okay, so you got to understand, you're playing out narratives with these, a lot of, we reincarnate, this idea that we reincarnate in soul families, and so you're interacting with them on other levels, and there are points and these different realities that are somehow connected. And so all of a sudden that energy flows through into this now moment. And you're like, hold on, what the heck? This doesn't even make any sense why they're behaving this way. And so I find that it's just a very interesting, thing to throw into the pot of what is going on here, and I think back to a particular interaction with my brother, maybe 3-4 years ago, something like that, where it is really trippy. So my ex-partner, she had 2 cats. And so at the time I was living with her, she had just moved in with me, and my brother lived with me at that time. And so it was like I don't know, 6 in the morning. These cats were like 8 years old. They'd lived together their whole lives, sisters, right? These two cats. 8 in the morning, or no, like 5 in the morning, sorry, really early. All of a sudden, these two cats are outside of me and my girlfriend's door, like just going at each other, like tearing each other, like trying to tear each other apart. And she's like, what? I've had these cats my whole life. What's going on? They've never done this, So she separated them. And I remember in that moment, in my half sleep, half awake state, thinking, oh my gosh, this is symbolic in some way, right? And so fast forward a few hours later, my brother out of nowhere came at me in the most aggressive way that just, it was so unwarranted based off of whatever was going on at the moment. And because of what had happened with these cats, and it instantly, I was like, oh, there it is, right? And because of that, I didn't react the way I probably normally would have, and therefore it didn't escalate to nearly what it probably would have based off of how aggressive he was being. And then, of course, in my head, I'm thinking to myself, like, wow, did these cats just help us avoid a timeline where we like physically do harm to each other or something? Or,
right.
I don't know. And here's the thing, Cory, these two cats, you could never have them together again after that day. They had to be separated permanently. One had to go live with her mom. One stayed with us. And you could never, she tried to put them back together at different times. And nope, they would have nothing to do with each other ever again.
Huh. Interesting.
Pretty interesting, right? And so that's, sort of how I who knows, right? But I think of these things when, like just the way that whole thing played out was really, really interesting.
Yeah. And I think definitely, the powerful thing to extract from that is just, as one moves through life, if once you run into challenging situations, being able to keep 50% of that interaction calm, and cool, what it does to the other person, in a good way. I mean, I find that just even when there is no conflict, if you are in a good habit of having good habits and treating yourself right and doing the work and so forth and remaining grounded and present-minded and open, man, whenever you go to do that dance, interact with someone, it can be, and it is everything from ordering a coffee at the coffee shop, hanging out with a friend, talking to someone wherever, just random people, just being able to bring that placidity and that openness and like resonance to people, man. It's a beautiful thing, and so, and when there's conflicts or potentials like that, being able to stay calm really can like just diffuse 90% of the issues.
For sure. Yeah. It's definitely been one of the greatest challenges and lessons for me is to learn how to not let myself get in that elevated, heated state.
What do you normally do when you're feeling that start to arise?
What I've started really doing is, well, for one, now I will become aware, that, I can see you're going down this slippery slope, whereas in the past it's completely unconscious, you know what I mean? So I'll then I'll really focus on my breathing, deeper, slower breaths. And just, I think the conscious, awareness of it instantly helps to, diffuse it to some degree. But there's still times where I'll just slip, completely into unconsciousness of like, I just like, and then I'll come back and be like, oh, well, I try again next time.
Yeah.
What do you do in those states?
Well, what's interesting is that I'm not like I've never been an explosive kind of anger type
I was about to say you don't seem, you just have the calm, cool demeanor. That does not surprise me at all. The guy with a voice like yours can't get but so heated.
Yeah. that would be funny. Scary,
maybe.
The voice of an angry god.
Yes, exactly.
I cast ye out.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, man. I don't feel the explosion. I mean, I do, of course, feel frustrated in things in life, but much like what you were talking about is just recognizing the faster that you can recognize kind of the sizzle on your skin and just the arising feeling of frustration. And the faster you can let it pass on, and not let it not bypass it, but let it pass on, and don't get wrapped up in that. Don't let that ember turn into a flame. Put your foot on it, stomp it out, but then extract the understanding of why you felt that way, and then kind of assess if you need to address something, or if it was just something dumb. It's so easy to get frustrated about stupid shit because our egos, come up with them all the time so that we'll stay self-focused. You know what I mean?
Right.
But yes, the breath and just being aware of what's arising and being able to let it go, and not turn that into action. That's one of the things I actually put it in my book, is that, you are not your thoughts. You are your thoughts that you turn into action. It's really, because all of us, we have 40,000 thoughts a day, kind of based on current neuroscience research.
Right.
And they're these little shiny objects. They're these little shiny clouds that pass by. And we think that each of them is so important and so powerful because we made them, right? Like, ooh, that must be great because it's in my head.
I've never had a stupid thought.
Right. But it's just a river, and it's just continuous process of, ultimately, our brains are so weird. It's like they're trying to get themselves to realize things. So it's like I seem to think that our thoughts are symbolic integration of our subconscious passing through the threshold of our conscious mind. So it's our subconscious symbolic mind trying to get, it's almost our intuitive mind trying to get our conscious intellectual mind to process something. Because our intellectual mind is kind of the one that has its hand on the steering wheel, and our subconscious mind, our heart mind, is the one that are the passengers in the car. And so they're trying to sort of help the ego mind drive in the right direction. Anyway, so
yeah, I like that.
Yeah, man, it's an interesting process. But when we have these thoughts, we have 40,000 of them a day. We have good ones, we have bad ones. But what happens because of the inner critic, because the intellectual mind is kind of in charge a lot of times, is that we have a negative thought. And it's so like you could be sitting, my favorite example in my own experience is like sitting at, just in your car or something and at a crosswalk, and a random person you've never seen before walks by. And you're like, oh, that's a stupid shirt. And it's like, wait, what is that? I don't know that guy. That's someone's son. It looks really nice fella. Like, why did that pop up in my head? And it's like, it's just this old, ancient, primal animal brain, which I actually call that in the book the evolutionary hangover. It's like our amygdala brain is still fighting with our frontal lobes, and we're in this process of emergence right now. It's like, why do you feel anxious at work in the office when your boss comes around? Well, that's your primal brain identifying them as like the food giver and the pack leader, and so you don't want to upset the pack leader, so you get anxious because you worry about your physical survival.
Yeah.
So anyway, those thoughts that arise, people tend to beat themselves up over them because they think, if I had a shitty thought, I must be a shitty person. And that's just simply not the case. Yeah. But what it is that when you have a thought like that, letting it go, even laughing at it, how kind of ridiculous it is, and then don't worry, because since you have 40,000 of them a day, you'll have another one in about 3 seconds, Right. So it's all about being able to take what arises that is good and put that into action. Because the things that pass through your mind that you don't express, no one ever knows about. You could be having very unpleasant, violent thoughts, but if you can let those pass on and honor the positive aspect of yourself, the light part of yourself, that's what it becomes who you are, because that's what you're actually turning into action to the world.
Yeah. And in realizing that those, quote unquote, darker thoughts are actually creating the context and contrast for the lighter thoughts to exist. So totally. For me, you bring in that perspective, and it's like, oh, okay, they actually have a purpose, and and the purpose isn't necessarily for me to go and rip this guy's ugly shirt off his back and burn it in the middle of the street. It's, giving me some sort of a contrasting, like, oh, hold on, like, there's a better way to look at this. There's a more loving, more kind way to look at this. And I think there's a big issue in our society in general, where, we have this habit of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Like, okay, this guy just said one dumb thing. Like, he's done. He's no longer, Cory just said, I'm sure there's someone who's heard me say something in the podcast at some point that, I love Positive Head. I love it. Oh, did Brandon just say, there's never been a victim in all of eternity? Done. Cut off. Bam. Bye. See ya. It's like, we're so quick to do that, and understanding and trying to hold people to, like, it's like we talked about what's your passion at the beginning. It's like, what's your passion now versus in 2016? That we're allowed to change and evolve. Like, holding people to who they were even 10 minutes ago is sort of a crime, much less 10 years ago or 10 months ago.
Oh, I would be terrified if my answer was the same. From 3 years ago. It's like we're these fluid critters that are like, because since we're always taking life in, we're always changing, right?
Right.
So whatever our stream of experiences and thoughts and interaction with the world it's constantly eroding who we were, and we're constantly becoming a new thing. That's actually what I call the upside of impermanence, is that people hear the idea of impermanence and get kind of bummed out because like, everything is going to die and rot away for all time of eternity. But for there to be things to decay forever, there must always be things coming into being. And our human experience is right in the middle of that. So we're always coming and going at the same time. And whenever you recognize that, you can allow yourself to just continuously become more of who you want to be as the old parts of you fall away.
Yeah. I wish I had it pulled up. I saw a quote recently, and it was talking about this very thing. Like, I've, something to the effect of, I've learned to fully accept when some part of me dies or something goes, because almost always it's so something better can be born, using like the caterpillar to the butterfly to the, like, that's sort of the flow of the universe from the broader picture. I believe it's like making way for some, it's like, obviously we get attached to relationships and people and things, but when you can have that vantage point, that very optimistic vantage point of, hold on, it's going to just continue to get better and more expansive and more rich in experience, and whether that be beyond this life, whether that be beyond what comes later. I mean, I can look back on my own relationships and, as a great example and see like, wow, how actually I started off with like the sweetest human ever. And then it just got really weird for a while and then like get better and better and better and better. And it's like, I think if we look back on our lives, we can see there is, yes, things are passing away all the time and making way for something new. And I think that goes, really well with, not having read your book yet, of course, but, now is the way. I mean, it just makes total sense. Like we're always, ready to sort of look like, I believe our spirit and soul or higher self or whatever you want to call it does is always looking forward into, what's to come, what's in now and forward, not necessarily looking back and always holding on to what was there.
Oh, absolutely, man. Did you feel in your past experience, whenever you were able to let go of kind of big chunks of who you thought you were and kind of emerge into this new butterfly, did you experience kind of moments of sadness and sort of like loss after that?
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
It's an interesting aspect of it that, go ahead, please.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, absolutely. It's like, I think there has, it's like you're mourning some part of yourself. Oh, that like childlike part of myself that did this thing that no longer serves me. I'm gonna miss him.
Yeah.
and it's So how about you?
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of like these plateau moments throughout my life where I would feel that shift, and then just more in that illusion of the eye that I was like letting go. But it's interesting is that can often dissuade people from continuing their path for growth, because they kind of will feel that and be like, oh, wait a second, why am I feeling that? Even with meditation, people go to meditate for the first time and it makes them move to feeling to, sadness to tears. Like, oh, I don't like meditating. It made me feel really upset. And it's like, well, that's actually all of what's in there. It's what's in there. It's trying to come out. You just stopped long enough to be able to actually feel it and become aware of it. But once you allow it to process and purge, then it all integrates and moves on. And then you're left with the cultivated empty space, negative space to really drink in your experience of who you are right now.
Right. Making room for more. And I think one of the big challenges for me with sort of letting go of old parts of myself or old, relationships or any of those things is I'm super nostalgic. So that's like, and can tend to be like, I'll appreciate something more when it's gone than when I have it, and that's something that I'm really working on in myself is like, being present, that's why I love that out of all the things you could have probably talked about, just the title of your book, Now is the Way. It's like, it's such I think there's a reason Eckhart Tolle's book struck such a chord, Power of Now. It's like, or Ram Dass, Be Here Now, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like, that is, it's like, the arrow needs to be continually pointed back to that because we're so quick and it's been a minute. So since I've heard something that sort of had that as part of the title. So when I saw that, I was like, yes, good call, Cory. Like
awesome.
That's like a Beatles tune or something. Like you can't really screw that one up too bad. Like that's an important thing that, as I say on the show all the time, I repeat myself constantly because it's what it takes. It's like we're rewiring our neural networks and we're really embodying this stuff. It takes like looking at it from, up, down, left, right, up the skirt of the now, around the back. Like, we want to really get that. So I'd love to just like, maybe you can give us, I know you've been giving us some tidbits, but some high level of what, the book itself, sort of the journey it will take the readers on.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks. So basically, it is, as you said, a lot of those other books, Be Here Now or Power of Now, those are 40, 50 years old. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I took a lot of, through my experience, the ways that I deconstructed my own suffering and figured out how to get on the other side of a lot of the challenges that I faced. A lot of what was useful in that was mindfulness and meditation and just, even neuroscience, philosophy, these different types of ways of thinking. And so given that where our society is at right now, technology has increased so fast that people are more anxious, more depressed, having their attention stolen more than ever before. And it's causing a lot of suffering. People feel fragmented and overwhelmed. And so the book really came from just kind of being in an interesting position whenever I started my podcast. The more I talked about what I had experienced in my life and ways that I moved through those challenges, is that listeners started hitting me up and saying, hey, I experienced that too. And the way that you talked about how you got out of it was really useful for me. It helped me understand a path forward. And I kept getting so many of those that I realized, one, these are just universal human experiences that we're talking about here. Right. These aren't just me experiences. And then two is that I should, eventually create a guide and a bit of a toolkit for people to be able to use. And so it's all of those experiences and really redefining mindfulness for what it means to live in the modern world today. All the things that we're dealing with in our stretched out, strange, weird, bizarre tech times of this modern world. So it's broken down into 4 sections, which is now, which I actually describe what the present moment is and how to feel it, and offer ways of how you can actually tap into that presence and just taste it and get a real glimpse of what it means to experience the moment, and then moving into a section there, which it all talks about ways that we get lost and pulled away from ourselves in life, get distracted. And then another section is called Here, which is how to reel yourself back in. Once we do all inevitably get carried away in this momentum of distraction, because that's what happens. That's what I call it in the book, as a momentum of distraction. We get caught into this, just one thing leads to the next, or just reacting to life over and over and over. Kind of like you were talking about earlier, whenever you said if you get really angry or something, you'll sort of like black out for a minute and wake up and be like, whoops, kind of, that's just that's of course, an extreme example, but many of us get into these habits of just reacting. And then a week goes by, a year goes by. You think, what if I haven't been living intentionally? I've just been authored by my past experiences and, genetic inheritance and programming and so forth. And so, the Here section really helps show how to recognize that and step out of that momentum of distraction and return back to living a life that you're authoring your future, that you're living with intentionality, and how to get back to just the abundance of this present moment of life. And then the final section is broken down into two parts. And it's really one of the things that I felt like I haven't seen in a lot of books around this topic is really actionable ideas. Like, how do you integrate this into your life? Like, it's great to read about something and kind of smile and feel good while you're reading it, but I want people to really be able to put this stuff and deploy this stuff into their experience, so they really can live it and feel that change. And so I intentionally built this bridge from knowing to doing in the second part. And that's the how section. And so part A of that is called 12 Ways to Now. And those are 12 guiding principles, of course, with descriptions. But each of those you deploy into your life, they're going to create, real tangible change. And I suggest you don't want to do them all at once. There are these 12 different things that and they're all interconnected, of course. But you just focus on one of them, like a good example. We've already talked about it. Don't let your past keep you from the present. I talk about how you can actually use your past to leverage your future, to learn from your experience, to change who you are today. Even things to like honoring your individuality, creating good habits, how to hang out with people that know more than you, how to not get trapped in your thoughts, why being kind to everyone is important, all these things and the reasons of why they will automatically increase your self-awareness and pull you back into the present moment. And then the second part of how is called On Meditation, which it's basically just a crystal clear guide on how you can start meditating and actually stick to that practice. And I really cut away all of the jargon, all of the fat, and just extracted the real tangible elements of how anyone can start a meditation practice and how to think about that. I note in there about, I think trying to describe meditation as an experience is really actually kind of more detrimental to someone's meditation future than not. It's sort of like if you tried to describe what it would be like for you to stand up and go into the other room and pour a cup of coffee. It's like you could talk about it, what it's like for a camera to film that. Like, what does that vision of it look like? But to talk about your existential first-person narrative experience of that thing is so impossible to get into someone else's head that it ends up kind of creating this murkiness and this unattainable experience. And so
pushes it further away.
Totally. So what I do is I talk about around meditation, and then I set people up to just try it for themselves so they can really build their own practice.
Yeah, I really like that, because I think one of the issues that you've obviously pinged on is, people hear about, meditation, it's so important. It's so important. And then, okay, all right, this is really important. How do I do it?
Right.
You watch your breath. You count, hold it for 3 seconds, count it for 5, do this, stand on one toe, swirl around. Oh, no. That's not how you do it. You focus on the third eye and roll your eyes in the back of your head and, you chant this mantra. And it's like, what do I do? Like, never mind. I'm just going to go watch Seinfeld.
Right. Who is an avid meditator.
There you go. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, he's been into transcendental meditation for 30 years or something. He's hardcore. But yeah,
Damn,
no, you're totally right.
Another way to meditate through watching Seinfeld. You laying back at a new path.
I think that's a reasonable way to do it. But yeah, one of the things that I like to touch on in all this stuff, man, is just lowering the stakes. Like people put it has to do a bit with our sort of our culture now, especially has evolved. Our American culture has evolved to a way to where, I think Brene Brown said it best, where she's like, either if you're not amazing, then that's not good enough. Even normal is not good enough. Normal is failing. So we have this idea because of kind of how social media has created a lot of faux celebrity and things like that, is that people feel like if they're not getting a lot of attention and quote unquote crushing it, in every aspect of their life, then they're failing and they're not enough and they need to be doing more and they're being left out and all this. It's just an unfortunate illusion that has been created as a byproduct of technology. So everyone calm down, lower the stakes, and start just putting one foot in front of the other. And, I actually put one of the first things I talk about in the meditation section is exactly what you touched on. And that's that humans tend to overcomplicate everything because we can't accept simple answers because those simple answers don't have our fingerprints all over them.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I think of Osho. I think it was Osho who talked about this once. He's like, look, just setting the intention to meditate and observing what arises, you're meditating. Okay, I'm sitting here and I'm going to observe what arises. And that really gets it that's breaking it down and making it as simple as you possibly could. I mean, that is okay. And I really like that idea. I like that notion of just setting the intention and you going and you sitting and being with yourself. Congratulations, you're meditating. Your intention is set. That's what your whatever technique you've employed, you have now sort of energetically made this statement that I care enough about myself. I'm going to do my version, my best to achieve this state that everyone is talking about as the best thing you can do for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I've been asked so many times about, how to meditate because not only just my online course, but I also I've been called a meditation teacher a lot whenever I kind of feel the way with teacher about the way I feel with the word artist. I had this idea one time that no one should be able to call themselves an artist. Only other people should get to call other people artists, right? So people can call you an artist, but you can't call yourself one. It's just kind of a joking way to stay ultra authentic and not get ahead of yourself. Anyway, I always say, just to throw in real quick to that,
sure. My way of doing that is I always will announce, and I say it all the time on the show, we teach best what we most need to learn. So as I go forward to teach, just remember we teach best what we most need to learn. And I think there's a lot of truth to that.
Yeah. So I've been asked a bazillion times how to meditate, and I've really tried to cut it down to the most simple answer I can. And as you're talking about, if you're mentioning this Osho quote, which I like, is that you literally just, close your eyes, breathe in, and just imagine you're breathing in life, whatever that means to you, slowly. Breathe like you're sleeping. And then when you exhale, relax all the muscles in your body, your shoulders, your face, and then repeat. That's it. Close your eyes.
I like it.
Just breathe in slowly, allow your chest to rise. And when you exhale, try and relax all your muscles again. And do that for 5 minutes and see how different you feel. And what's amazing about meditation is that it can be that simple. And it's incredible what I just described. If you just do that and keep doing that, all the other stuff will show up for you to work with. And over time, you'll start to get deeper and more threads and dimensions of it will open up. But what I described is the core of the whole practice, right? And meditation is as deep as your mind because it is your mind.
Right.
You can't, I have gone, like, I've been meditating for 20 years, and like under a lot of different circumstances. And I have gone because I like plunging to the depths and seeing what's going on in the trenches sometimes. There's no bottom. There's no bottom, man. And there's no bottom because it is your brain, right? So there's no bottom. You can't reach the bottom of your head in your mind. You can't reach the bottom of your meditation. So the important thing to go is that it's not a contest. It's not this sort of like, you don't need to go deep, man. Like you need to go where you need to go and meet yourself there. And then trust me, if there is an area below that you need to get to, then your mind will let that part of the foundation crack and you'll fall down to that next layer and work with what you need to work with.
Right. And, this whole idea of course, the mind is sort of, the way I view it is like it's sort of a receiver for our consciousness, which is, our higher self or our spirit, whatever it is. And this is like the radio tuner in a sense. And, I've heard this idea that it is whenever you're meditating, you're going within, and you have people, of course, who claim to have some really deep and profound experiences, right? Like angelic entities or extraterrestrials or seeing other dimensions of reality or merging with God, whatever it may be. This idea that, that I've heard is really fascinating when it's like, and all of this incredible amount of dimension that, on the far end of what meditation, I guess the extreme end of what you might hear could be or is, or that can arise. And all of that is still just an extension of you, spirit guide you talk to, supposedly that's really just another version of you. You're talking to some being that seems to be, from another totally different realm, and it's you. It's a really interesting way to sort of think about and approach all of that sort of more woo-woo, weirdness. And even this, maybe the frightening stuff that arises, to me, that's the most. You talked about something arising like pain or negativity or any of that. Matt Kahn said it, with the title of his book, and I just love it. It's so simple and profound. It's like whatever arises, love that. So you're in meditation, maybe you're experiencing something dark or something's coming up for you. It's like, it's cliche as it sounds, like whatever arises, loving that. It's like the most powerful, energy in eternity to be able to, love really, I feel will dissolve whatever is coming up or coming through. And understanding that and like, it's that combined with this idea that it's all an extension of me in some way, whatever I'm going to bump up against, whether internal or external. And, and love is the answer, Now, what was the question? Pretty much my favorite quote. And it's like those two things empower me in such a way where it's like I feel like I can face whatever's going to arise.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, that's really important. Like we get it twisted, because when things arise that are challenging or painful or whatever, and we don't want to work with them. But if I saw you, and if you looked like you were in pain, I would go, Brandon, are you okay, man? Are you all right? Like, can I help you? Like, what's going on? And why wouldn't we do that for ourselves? Right? So whenever that feeling arises, we just need to do that for us. And we're trying to, get over on that thing. It's funny. I love what you're saying about, experiencing different dimensions during meditation, because truthfully, like, every single day, my meditation is the most psychedelic, far out, visionary type of experience. And
really?
Yeah. It's like like ayahuasca almost, but with less, physical vibration.
With less
happening.
puking.
Yeah, a lot less puking, 100% less puking. Like what's interesting about that is that I have tested the waters of like, okay, these eagle gods that with golden feathers that are giving me prophecies of the future and like all of this great like time slicing experiences of like different timelines and shit like that, and it's like psychic connections with other people's brains. Is I've wondered like, man, this feels so real in my mind's eye, but then the skeptic part of my brain goes, well, of course, it's just the emergent symbols of my subconscious wiring into this like waking dream-like state that so that I can more deeply understand myself, right? And like more like kind of process my thinking. And then at the same time, I will also have those thoughts where an individual will arise, and I'll like have a thought about them or some interaction, and then they'll text me like 10 minutes later and start talking about, and then I'll go, oh right. It not only is it all you, all of those symbols and all of those things and like critters and entities and aliens that you interact with, it's also everyone else. So it's all God, right? In every possible way. Yep.
Yeah, that's the thing, man. When you start like, when these wild experiences happen and then there's some sort of external tie-in, then it's like, oh, hold on. Is, the skeptic in me or whatever, this is all in being produced by my subconscious. It's all an internal thing. And then you realize, hold on, everything is just an extension of my internal state. It's, everywhere I go, I'm there waiting for myself. Like that consciousness that I'm tapping into within me is actually what I'm seeing when I open my eyes too. It's just extended, outward there as well. And it's, that's the thing that's just like, okay, which leads me to believe like, but and it's kind of like relative truths, right? That's how I put it. It's like, okay, it's all like I was talking about a few minutes ago. It's all an extension of you, and it's also other, like, two apparently contradictory things that are both true. You and I are separate. Great case can be made for that. Another more nuanced case can be made for you and I are one, right? The consciousness that animates my form is the consciousness that animates your form. The separation between us is illusory, and I'm talking to myself, and there's only one listener, right? Yeah. So it's such a fascinating rabbit hole to go down, and I find it really interesting as someone who hasn't been the most a dedicated meditator and someone who, has told the story of, it's tricky for me to quiet my mind and, all those excuses. And I do meditate, and I have, maybe a few times a week I'll drop into meditation and like, don't judge myself for how deep it goes or doesn't go. And, but I have never had any experiences where I'm having like powerful visions of, entities or anything like that, and or ayahuasca. Like, I've done ayahuasca, but I've never had like an ayahuasca like experience meditating. So I find that really fascinating, and it's actually one of the things that draws me to when I hear someone else's account like yours. It's like, Brandon, you're missing the boat, man. You gotta like be more dedicated to this. That sounds too fun. I want to talk to the golden eagle man from my subconscious or wherever he's coming from.
Yeah, no, it's really fascinating. I tend to like chunk out my meditation in different like sections. So the beginning is like the cool off, kind of just blowing off whatever I'm holding and kind of releasing to the thing. Then I move into like the visionary state, and I just like listen. It's like paying attention and like watching and like listening for what, basically what are the insights, what are the lessons that these symbols and these visionary experiences are trying to tell me, regardless if it's my subconscious or if it's some other dimension or whatever. Just okay. And then I finish it off with, it's like cooking a steak, right? And I finish it off with what I call the watcher, which is like no mind meditation, which is actually, I do include that in the book, the watcher meditation, which is as powerful as the visionary states. And that is the no mind of literally just sitting and breathing and tapping into, it's kind of like the balancing of the unification of your conscious and subconscious with just pure presence. And it's like, it's like a sort of really a good battery charger, that one.
Right. Wow. So I love a good story, and this gets me in that mindset of, oh, I want to hear, like, if you have something good that's bubbled up for you, maybe in a meditation or just a, synchronicity story, serendipity story, something positive, paranormal, any of that stuff, I just love to hear, and listeners love to hear. So does anything come up for you that would be fun to share?
Yeah, I'll tell you one that challenged my skepticism.
Cool. Like that.
Because,
like the sound of it so far.
I am, I'm definitely 50% scientific materialist, 50% sort of like hypotheticist. Let's put it that way. I'm open to dreaming about like, well, what is possible? While often I like to cast that net out, see what thought experiments, what can I test and stretch and see the limits and boundaries of reality, and then feed that through a rationalist filter to distill what's useful and what's, will not lead me to a place of delusion, but will lead me to insights of greater truth.
Right. And I like that.
So, when it was speaking, it was, I guess, probably 5-6 years ago or something, but whenever I was in ayahuasca ceremony in the Amazon, my experiences were really, really intense. And one evening I basically was sitting just in the same room with this other person that I kind of barely knew. And it's rather tough to describe, but basically my consciousness like traveled into my awareness. It felt like it left my body and traveled into this tube that went into this person's mind, and like saw all of these. It was like Polaroids getting thrown down really fast, and then there were like these conduit. It was like of her life and experience, and then there was these. Imagine like the neural network being like a bunch, like a geodesic dome, like a bunch of triangles that create a sphere. Like imagine if there was that, but 3-dimensional. So it was also like those triangles went inside as well, not just like creating a sphere. Like that was the neural pathways. And I was like, my consciousness was moving through those. And I got to an interconnected point where one of those intersections where a bunch of those triangles met was like covered in black, like calcified hard material. And I started like clawing at it and ripping it away. And there was all this like pulp, like soft, like scarred meat underneath it. And I threw all that black crust like out of the same, it looked like white Vaseline, like what the tube was made of, like that I entered in, threw it out there, and then left. And I kept like feeling this motherhood thing. Like that was the vibe and like pain around motherhood. And I left. And then I was like, my consciousness felt like it returned to my body. And that was just one of, 10 minutes of a 6-hour, like crazy experience. But so the next day, I was like, that was so uncanny. It was just bizarre, right? Yeah. So I went over to this person. I was like, hey, I know we don't really know each other, just I want to tell you this experience. And I don't by any means mean to be overstep any boundaries, but it's too strange. I just wanted to share it. So I shared what happened. And she was like, yeah, last night I was like working with this fact that I had been, she had some sexual trauma and it kept her from being able to be a mother and like up until that point. And that was what she was going through that night, but she was working through it and had like a breakthrough that evening. Wow. And so let's pause and say, one, I don't take any ownership of like that reason she had a breakthrough. I think maybe, I don't know, if one wants to allow themselves to be released to complete metaphysical kind of psychic possibilities, then it's like perhaps, in the conduits of all of our consciousnesses swirling around that evening, I somehow was a part of that experience or was able to view that experience or something. But
or really contribute to it in some way that you,
or that. But what I will say is that's one of the things that challenged my skepticism was because I had no possible way of having any prior knowledge to that experience. And then in the same evening, having that experience, or in further ceremonies, feeling like I was, like I got hit in the chest with like this meteor, and like my heart chakra exploded with like blue light, and my whole like my body disappeared and exploded, and basically I was just this like throbbing vessel of blue light during one of the ceremonies. That was like almost like blue fire or something. And the next day, having people that were there, multiple people being like, I was looking at you and it looked like you had blue flames coming off of you during the ceremony.
Wow.
It's like, what? No. So I still don't know what to do with those experiences other than file them in the head scratcher. Like, maybe there's clearly shit that's going on in this universe that we don't understand yet. And I don't pretend to understand it, but had I not experienced those things for myself, like I would not, one, be able to understand them, and two, even be able to accept that they were real, or that they occurred. But it's something that as much as I stay as reasonable and clear-minded and as rational, and I only do that out of a love and integrity for other people and myself, is because the last thing I want is anything I ever say or do to make someone further away from themselves or further away from reality. I want people to find their truth and find, peace in what is real, not go down a hall of mirrors and experience a bunch of suffering. But those experiences definitely keep that door cracked, where I don't ever, and I think it's healthy, man. I think it's good to where I never go, okay, humans have got it figured out, and this is what consciousness is, and this is
healthy
what all
skepticism is good.
Yeah, and so healthy skepticism is good, but what I'm saying is that I think that healthy, almost fantasy or ability to dream is also good too.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm definitely not scared of that. And, I think it's how I approach all of this stuff. It's like, I can say what's happened to me that is, sort of mind-boggling. And I've had what I feel like some very magical experiences that, I don't know how to explain other than there's something more going on beyond myself. The way I theorize and believe it's going on and talk about a lot on the show. But I also, but then I'll have people on all the time who've had like, I'm speaking a light language and I talk to this, extraterrestrial named, Zilwad or whatever his name is. And I'm like, okay, maybe Zilwad's there. I don't know. I'm open. Like I've seen some weird shit myself. So
that sounds like a weird.
He has a better name, but
Zilwad sounds like something you'd insult an alien with, Alien drops
just pissed off like a whole race.
Yeah, it's like, hey, Zilwad, you landed your spacecraft on top of my car, man.
That was definitely. I think I just pissed off a whole species out there somewhere.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, you did,
dude. Uh-oh. So yeah, man, I'm with you. I totally get it. I love your perspective and where you're coming from. And my question to you is, you talked about your meditations being almost like ayahuasca-esque type experiences. That's pretty wild if you're having that powerful of, visualizations, meditating on a daily basis, then I would say.
I agree. Yeah, it's basically just like dreaming with your, like, while being awake, I guess, but like having kind of some agency within that dream. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, there's weird liminal states, man, like that I think all of us are sort of like moving in and out of. And I don't know, maybe I've just got kind of, those have melted together a little bit over time and, through some experiences and just repetition. Like I'm definitely dedicated to my like meditation practice and that deepening of the inner awareness, and perhaps some of those frequencies have become interwoven in a way that it's easy to drop into those states. I
right.
know, but I'm grateful for it because it brings useful insights and direction that I can move forth into life. And I'll tell you a funny one after we're done here that was kind of leads to something we were talking about before we recorded. But they're just very useful, very, very useful to listen to those. And I've been really vibing with DK Suzuki, who's a Zen author that I dig a lot. But there's this sentiment in one of his books that suggests that intuition is kind of one of the ultimate forms of enlightenment. And by that, he doesn't mean system one mind, as Daniel Kahneman would put it in Thinking Fast and Slow. He means the innate, the bottom of your arising awareness, like the root of that pre-language, pre-intellect, pre all of that stuff, the very ground floor of what's coming up from your consciousness, that is actually the fullness of what you are. And if you can honor that, and the further along you can allow that to pass through before it becomes modulated by your self-criticism and your kind of irresistible tendency to shape it into the shape of how you think it needs to be received by society and all these things, the more you can listen to that, the more you will find your way and reach this state of awareness and what he calls enlightenment. And I feel like the more times in life that I can listen to that thing and just respond to it instead of just sitting with it or putting it off or whatever, the more magic really starts to happen. And even in conversations like we were talking about earlier, where people get, if you have some emotional, conflict or something, instead of trying to come up with this script to position your response, just tell them how you feel. Listen to that intuitive mind and that heart mind. And it's amazing what happens when you do.
Yeah, I love that whole perspective about intuition. And I really have noticed myself, I have less time for, what we tend to do as, humans and social creatures where we're like, oh, okay, I don't like what Cory just did. But I'm not going to tell him. I'm going to actually let him know through the subtle action that I take by not answering his text or what, we do all this nonsense of like beating around the bush. And I've just gotten to where like more and more it's like, I just want to come right out with it, exactly what I feel, exactly what I think, not worrying so much about ruffling feathers, being aware to like try and present it in a way that's actually receivable and can lead to some resolution. But like, I have less and less time for all these like games that we play, with each other. And so that's what that kind of makes me think of, is like, just get to the baseline of what's going on. Like, we don't have time to beat around the bush anymore. It's just like, it's so much BS. Absolutely. And once you bridge that, you build that bridge with someone, then you become known as like, oh, I can talk to, if we have a conflict, like, oh, I can talk to Brandon about stuff. Like if we have a problem, I can tell him it's all good. And it really, the more you show up in that way for people in your life, the more that everyone in your life system becomes this, turns into this beautiful form of communication, because everything's all good, right? People know that they can be comfortable and trustworthy and stuff like that, and that you can voice those things. And yeah, it's super healthy. Yeah. And you're giving them permission to navigate in that way too. Yeah. Exactly. It's like I was talking about with my friend Chris earlier. That's definitely something that I've cultivated with him more and more, is like, no more of this like sort of, subtle blowing you off or whatever because I'm not feeling what you did or doing or whatever. It's like, how about I just go like fully out with it? And how about I blow you on? That's what we're going to call it. Let me think about that one. Yeah, think about it. I'll think about it. We'll talk about that in episode 3 when you're back. Yeah. Dude, this has been so epic. You're amazing, and I'm so excited for you with the new book. Maybe take a moment and tell everyone where, I'm assuming it's all the places you can find books. And of course, we didn't even talk about Astral Hustle, your podcast. So letting people know about that and the best way to connect. Well, thank you so much, man. First off, I just appreciate you having me on. And I also think you're awesome. I love every time that we get to talk. I looked at my schedule today and I was like, ooh, I get to go talk to Brandon. This will be fun. Made me happy. Nice. But
But yeah, if you, dear gentle listener, if you like some of the nice soft baritones that have been coming your way and you'd like to feel more of those, nowistheway.com is where you can find the book. It's, links you up to all the different places where you can check it out. And then the podcast is the Astral Hustle. And yeah, I really believe in the book came from the heart, and it with all of the right intentions and pathways in there. And I know and I truly believe that it will help and be of service to anyone that's called to check it out. So
I have no doubt. Just, you have so much wisdom and it's so authentic, and that, your resonance, it's just like palpable. I notice with people who've really done the work, you know what I mean? You can just feel, just talking to them or being around them energetically. And that's a whole nother topic of conversation. But, this idea that our, who we are extends beyond our body. And it is, you hear about like masters that you could be around, and you just being around them, the people would become enlightened or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think we're all in different phases of that in our development. And the more we do the work ourselves, the more it like sort of ripples out. And it's like, oh, wow, talking to Cory feels really, really good. And the things that he's saying are a match for that. So it's just like, it's sort of like becomes this complete package. So, I think it's always fascinating for me to people that have done a really hardcore committed to meditation and have been doing the work for a long time. It's without fail that they have that sort of like, there's that Zen-like energy that's flowing through that is pretty powerful.
Yeah. And well, thank you. If that was a compliment.
It was a very long-winded compliment, the way I like to do it.
Thank you so much. And it is fascinating, right? How you can feel that when you're not even in the same room, right? Like it's trippy.
Right.
It's like
it really is.
Yeah, it's kind of a amazing, the power of sound, right? Resonance, and like the way that even the resonance of your self comes out through your voice and how it can affect people. Yeah, it's beautiful thing.
Yeah, totally. It really is. It's this. You may have heard it before. This term "sobet," which is using sound to enlighten, and voice and transmissions and energetic transmissions with sound to sort of enlighten people, and that's what comes to mind for me. So. Mm-hmm. I think we're doing our best version of that as we teach best what we most need to learn. And I've definitely enjoyed doing that with you here today, Cory, and would love to have you on Optimistic too. So we'll talk about that.
Of course. Thank you.
Yeah. Having you live and direct on the show, I think the live audience would really enjoy it, and, getting to connect in 3D with you would be cool.
Absolutely. So.
4D, 5D, wherever the heck wherever we are these days. I can't keep up.
Yeah, me either, man. Me either.
Oh, man. Okay, so I have one last question here I'd like to leave you with. Let's see how this one's changed. This is my other very predictable, very cliche outro question, and it is this. In 60 seconds or less, what is the meaning of life according to Cory Allen?
Oh, man. I think that the meaning of life is life itself.
That's a good answer. I'll go with that. I'll accept that. Your answer has been approved for release.
All right.
And it's one of those that has been you hear repeatedly, which is interesting because it's like if everyone's reaching at the meaning of life, I think the more of us kind of come to the same conclusion in a sense. It's like okay, maybe there's something to it here. Like so.
Yeah, that's another one of those things that humans tend to overcomplicate is that, the meaning of life is life, but the meaning in life is what we build into it.
Ooh, I like that little addition. That's a first.
Yeah, I just had to go through 10 years of utter existential hell searching for meaning and truth to figure that one out. Yeah.
Thank you. And I'll take that on an afternoon, on a Tuesday afternoon, so I don't have to go through those 10 years. I appreciate I appreciate that sacrifice, my friend.
My pleasure. That's what we're here for.
Oh, Cory, you are a gem, my friend. Thank you so much. And all of you out there listening, until next time, journey well. Love you so, so much. And if you're feeling the call to come for a week retreat style Mystic Manor immersion, remember to go now and book your time to speak with me directly about stepping into the optimistic vortex at calendly.com/talk with Brandon while there are still spots left. Otherwise, I look forward to co-creating magic with you at the Mystic Manor.